Good evening, I think we're live. Well, there's a bit of sun glare there. I'll do something. How are we all doing? Who's in the house? Evening, Sally, Anne, PJ, Joan, Kelly. Welcome. Just, can you all hear me? Walton's in reverse, yeah, isn't it? Bowl lady today, purity. Can you hear me? Just let me know. I'm live. I'm not talking to myself. Should be 6 people in. Remember, this is interactive. We hear you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so Waffle tonight. Something that came up last week. I think it was Kelly's question about how different arts, for example, Tai Chi, Kung Fu, seem to have very different theory. And I was talking a little bit about how they were more similar than you might think. At the beginning levels, all the different martial arts, they have different characteristics, and they call dakdim, like the special points. But as they progress, they tend to get more similar. So the problem with people learning many different systems, but not very deep, is kind of like, they have the analogy in meditation of when you're digging a well and you end up with like 100 different holes, like none of them deep enough. Whereas if you pick one spot and you dig and you go down, 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 down until you get the water, and then that's the same thing. You can learn this method, this method, this method, this method, and have hundreds, so many forms, so many sets, so many styles, and you don't have the essence. And it's possible to pick one style and go deep and get the same essence as all of the other styles, like, so the water is the same. However, there are arguments to kind of cross-training and learning different things, because sometimes it can help you understand the method that you're on, but they're more like supporting your main practice. As long as you have a main practice, something you do ideally every day, and you make progress and you work on that thing, that's kind of the important. So what I thought today was I just read a little bit from some. I've got 2 things which I chose. One was from the Tai Chi Classic, and one was from a Shaolin Classic. And then I want to read them both, and you can maybe see if there's any common themes in the theory of it. If you watch the forms, they look very different, but maybe there's some common theory here. Story time. Okay, so this is the Tai Chi Chuan fundamental key points. This is not Yang Cheng Fu's 10 points that I've spoke about before. This is different, but some of them are the same. So this is one of the classics, the Tai Chi classics. Allegedly, well, we've got, there's 23 here. Perhaps I should have simply spoke about Yang Cheng Fu's 10 because of time constraints. But anyway, let me go through them fairly rapidly just to give you a taster of it. Number 1, an insubstantial energy leads the head upwards. They call dengeng in Chinese, dengeng, which is the raising upwards. Hi, Josh KK, welcome. It's okay, don't worry. So number 1, an insubstantial energy leads the head upwards. Number 2, the eyes gaze with concentrated spirit. And then I'll read a little bit of the commentary. When a person has concentrated and raised his spirit, the eyes will be bright and he'll be able to pay attention to even the slightest movement of the enemy. This is something you can see. My Sifu, when he turns it on, his eyes just, you know straight away. And there's something in the spirit coming out. So my Sifu called Ngan Sun. Ngan is an eye, Sun is a spirit. Number 3, hold the chest in, arch the back. So the back between the shoulders has a feeling of being lifted and the chest is slightly sunken. This lets the chest relax and the lungs move naturally. This is used to neutralize the opponent's attack and to store energy within the posture. So this is something misunderstood a lot of time. A lot of people think it means to kind of hunch over. It doesn't mean that. If you imagine like a military posture with the chest like this, now you drop this just to here, but you don't collapse the ribs. So it's just gentle. Okay, that's the 3rd point. 4th point is sink the shoulders, drop the elbows. A lot of people have trouble with that. Especially people tend to be tense in the shoulders. You've got to let that go. The elbows dropping is closely connected to the shoulders as well, because when you sink we call 𝐒𝐚𝐽 in Kung Fu, when you sink 𝐶𝐻𝑒𝐽𝑗ang, the elbows dropped, the shoulders dropped. So that's number 4. Number 5, settle the wrists, extend the fingers. When the hand is extended, palm down, settle the wrist means to drop the wrist slightly, so the base of the palm. So say I'm pushing this kind of motion. This facilitates striking with the palm. Remember to keep the wrist relaxed. Extend the fingers means let them be straight but not tense. This should not be forced. Gradually get used to holding the fingers fairly straight so there is no hindrance to blood and qi. You see people with the hands like very tense, like almost clawed. And so you want to open without being stiff. So it's in this kind of sense. Number 6, the body is central and upright. Straight and erect, not leaning to any side. We can talk about that. There's many instances in Tai Chi where you do lean, so it's a misunderstanding to say that the body never leans, but we can talk into that. Number 7 is the tailbone should be drawn up slightly to the front to keep the pelvis, the proper angle, and the lower back is straight. When the tip of the tailbone is allowed to move backwards, the pelvis tilts and the lower back curves inwards. This deprives the lower abdomen support and lets the belly bulge forward. So I see this common actually in students, and sometimes it's to do with tight hip flexors, and there's various reasons. A bent lower back also hinders the efficient transmission of energy up and down the spine. So this is very, very, what's the word? It can go very well along with the Western sports science, okay? Engaging the glutes and transmission of force and so on. Number 8, relax your waist, relax your thighs. So the waist controls and directs the application of force. The thighs connect the waist to the knees, which are very important in all movement and in generation of force by the legs. It is therefore important to keep the waist and thighs relaxed and movable. Number 9, the knees look relaxed but are not relaxed. It's an interesting one. The knees look relaxed but are not relaxed. In Tai Chi Chuan, the ging or the jing is generated from the legs, so the power is coming from the legs. In order to do this, the legs must behave like springs to spring out power. Therefore, the knees must be relaxed. However, the legs are also vital in changing the steps during the fight. When this happens, they must move fast and firm. In order to move fast with a firm root, the knees must be able to change their tension skillfully. Therefore, this statement means that the knees look relaxed but can be tensed wherever necessary. Number 10, the feet are flat on the ground. The feet must be flat on the ground and relaxed so that your root will be stable. Unless a specific posture calls for it, don't rest your weight on just the heel or the toes, but instead let the weight spread over the whole of the foot. Keep your attention at the center of the foot, a little behind the bubbling well point. This is where the center of gravity naturally falls. Okay, just a little aside. The bubbling well is the first point on the kidney meridian, which is about 1/3 of the way along the foot. So they're saying behind that, so it's more towards the top of the arch of the foot. Number 11, top and bottom follow each other. The entire body should be harmonious. And then the notes say the entire body must move in a unified, coordinated way. Your upper body movement determines what your legs do, and your legs control your upper body. Arms and legs must move together, especially when pushing. Number 12, distinguish insubstantial and substantial. So the body as a whole, as well as each individual part, has a substantial and insubstantial aspect. Usually one leg and one arm should be substantial at a time. Which part of the body depends on the opponent's actions. When the opponent is substantial, I become insubstantial where he contacts me, and substantial somewhere else. So if he's pushing this shoulder, I'm not fighting back. I become insubstantial on that part and substantial possibly in my other hand. One must clearly judge whether the opponent's attack is substantial or insubstantial. That means whether it's a fake or a real attack. Very often, an opponent can change a substantial force into insubstantial or vice versa. Therefore, I must know my yin and yang and also know my opponent's yin and yang. Then I know my enemy, but the enemy doesn't know me. So that's a reference to Sun Tzu, The Art of War. I can control him, but I cannot be controlled. That's a lot to do with kind of faking out. Okay, 13, internal and external are mutually coordinated. breathe naturally. Breathing, this is the commentary, breathing, qi, muscular strength, and intention, which is yi, must all act together. Breathing should be relaxed and should match your actions in a comfortable way. If the breathing is tense or jerky, then there's tension in the body. The mind is not still. The qi flow is hindered, unable to support the gung, which is the power. 14, use yi, not lik. Use your intention, not your muscles, not your strength. You should use skill, technique, and intelligence to defeat your opponent and not just overwhelm him with strength. It also means that when you do a technique, you should only think of what you're doing, e.g. pushing the opponent, locking an arm, whatever. Don't think of chi or strength or your body, or this will split your attention and weaken the technique. And I've often said that when your intention is on the application, you're not thinking about chi. The chi follows your intention. So if you think about it, you block it, you stop it. When you use your intention to move, qi is automatically circulated. But when you use strength, you'll be more tense and qi circulation will be hindered. 15, the qi circulates through the whole body. Dividing, it moves up and down. Although qi is always circulating, it is also moving simultaneously to the dantian, which is the center below the navel, where it is stored, and to the spine to be used in techniques. Of these two ways, the movement down the front of the body to the storage area at the dantian is yin. The movement through the tailbone and up the spine to the hands is yang. Thus, it is said, qi adheres closely to the bones of the spine and flows upwards. 16, where the mind is, the qi is. So qi follows the mind. It's the same thing, really. 17, every form of every posture follows smoothly. No forcing, no opposition. The entire body is comfortable. So the whole of the Tai Chi form should flow smoothly from beginning to end. There should be no breaks, jerks, or sharp angles. The movement should be natural and comfortable for your body. In each posture, every part of the body contributes either directly or by counterbalancing. No part of the body should be hindering this unified flow. That's why it's so important that you have muscular stiffness. The body's fighting itself. It's like riding a bike with the brakes on. You need to release and then you need to coordinate. Similarly, the next one, each form is smooth. Each form in the sequence should be done smoothly with mind, qi, and body unified. 19, postures should not be too little or too much, not insufficient or excessive. They should be centered and upright. So you're not drawn in too much and you're not overextending. You're finding that relaxed point. 20, your application should be concealed, not exposed. That means your opponent shouldn't know what you're going to do. What they call telegraphing in boxing. Your attack and defense should be concealed and unpredictable. 21, attain stillness in motion. That means when you're doing your form, you're moving, but your mind is still. So that's the kind of the mental state of the meditation. 22, attain motion in stillness. That means, for example, when you're in a posture that's still, internally the qi is flowing, so there's motion in stillness. Lastly, light, then agile. Agile, then move. Move, then vary. So the commentary is, this is Tai Chi Chuan in a nutshell. The first requirement is to clear the mind, relax the body, and circulate the qi. Then you'll be light. If you adhere to your opponent, so you're sticking, not resisting, and not letting go, then you'll be agile. You can then move to attack and defense. But remember to vary your attacks and responses so that your intentions cannot be read by your opponent. Okay, so that's one of the old classics of Tai Chi. And then in a minute, I'm going to read something from the Shaolin Gong Fu, and I want to see how much similarity there is or not. Any questions on that bit so far? It's a bit like Jackanory today. Or my American colleagues won't get what Jackanory is, but it's like reading a book, which I don't normally do. But I had no emails or questions this week, so I decided to do some reading instead. But I'll give you a minute if you want. A lot to take in at once. Well, correct. My intention of reading all those wasn't for you to learn them all, was to get a feeling of it, a kind of a sense of the language. Then I'm going to read one from Shaolin for comparison. That's the idea. Yeah, it takes years to learn that. to be able to embody it. You can memorize the words, but it takes years to really deeply understand that. Okay, guess I'll go back to my reading. Okay, I'm going to read. This was written by a student of 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐼. So 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐼, for those of you who don't recall, 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐼, very famous because he published several books on the 𝐂𝐚 style, and his sifu was 𝐂𝐚 that developed the tiger crane style. So different, completely different lineage and system. This is from the Southern Shaolin system, so nothing to do with Tai Chi. And 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐼's student published this book. So 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐼's sifu, 𝐂𝐚, if those of you that may recall, was a contemporary and a friend of my sifu's grandfather. So it's not my lineage, but there's a connection. Dang Long was a good friend of 𝐂𝐚. They used to go yum-cha together, have dim sum and chat kung fu, and used to fight together as well. Those were the days when if there were bandits or there was local militia, that they would get these guys together, and it was the kung fu school. So these guys had a lot of fighting experience. Okay, so in the 𝐂𝐚 they have a form called 𝐒𝐻𝐚, which is sometimes translated as iron thread or iron wire. Okay, now I think there's a big similarity between the iron wire and the concept of silk reeling. Some may disagree, but fight together as in side by side. Yes, as in side by side. They would go looking for brothers that had the same affiliation to fight together, to form like a militia. Yeah, definitely badass. Yeah. Okay, so there, the iron thread of the iron wire form is 𝐂𝐚's internal or qigong set. Now, if you watched it, there's a lot of vocalizing. There's a seemingly tension. It seems very, very different from Tai Chi, right? Totally different from Tai Chi, seemingly. Here are the 10 important points for training the 𝐒𝐻𝐚 form. Number 1, relax the waist, raise the crown. You see where this is going? 𝐿𝐴𝐴 𝐷𝐴𝐴, 𝐿𝐴𝐴, waist relaxed, 𝐷𝐴𝐴, head is up. So I'll read you some of the commentary. When you're training, the waist and abdomen must be firmly held, the neck lifted up and the breathing concealed in preparation for offense and defense. Keep in mind that the vertebra in the waist act as the pivotal axis and the central balance point, neither weak and infirm nor forceful and immovable. Raise the crown as if balancing 1,000 kilos on top of one's head. Correctly done, the neck will then balance firmness and flexibility in rotation so that all actions may be agile with reactions fast and accurate. Then as one connects they call the Ren and Dumai meridians, that's the front and back, one's air circulating remains uninterrupted by one's physical movements, thus harmonizing hard and soft, which is called Gong Yao. Do you see where this is going? The point of this lecture. Number 2, the feet cling to the ground, living roots. San Gan. To explain clinging to the ground, first the soles of the feet must stick to the floor, creating pressure between the feet as if to spread the floor surface. Again, grabbing down with one toe tips as if to dig into the floor. Cling to the ground like fallen leaves, living roots roots of a very large tree. When unweighted, like fallen leaves. When weighted, then like living roots. Thus clearly establishing the contrast between empty and full in Kanti we call hoi and sat. Now, if you recall, there's one of Yang Cheng Fu's important points is clearly distinguish full and empty. Number 3, focus the essence, gather the mind. It's 这里经我一上. which also can translate as spirit. To focus the essence, one must breathe in a calm and steady fashion. To gather the mind, one must first quieten the heart. That's the thoughts and the emotions. With steady breathing, one's energy is maintained, distributed through each body section, joint by joint, calmly and in place. This means focus the essence. To quiet the heart is to be empty-minded. So there's the Shaolin comes from the Zen school of Buddhism. So in Zen, they talk about emptiness, right? Focused essence and gathered mind can generate greater power through the form limbs by improving the production of skeletal marrow. This is something, a Shaolin Qigong concept, which is called marrow washing. A gathered mind is better able to see movements from the 4 directions and hear sounds from the 8 directions. So you see movement from 4 sides and you hear sounds from 8 directions. Okay. 4th one. Tongap Fan Ming. The breathing, inhalation and exhalation is clearly divided. I've changed the translation slightly because I think it's better. Inhalation and exhalation clearly divided. Exhalation is expelling negative energy, and inhalation is to draw fresh air. By pushing out the old and breathing in the new, one's inner circulation will be much improved, as well as promoting cellular regeneration through the body as a whole. In this way, one may train the air and use the strength without unnecessary concern of self-injury. Number 5, Heicham Dantin. The chi sinks to the Dantin. I'm just have a look at this. There's a lot of detail here about the actual circulation of the chi meridians, possibly not relevant to go through too much of that now. So above, below, front, back, free of any heavy top and floating bottom, stooping forward and leaning backwards. Okay, so this is we talk about the microcosmic orbit, or the small circulation, yeah? 𝐒𝐮𝐩𝐸𝐴, which is where the chi goes up the back and down the front. So there's a lot of detail about that. Number 6, sunken elbows in line with the shoulders. Sunken elbows means the elbows are protruding sideways, they're kept concealed, they're best positioned to avoid external forces. Referred as broken force. I'm skipping now because there's a lot of repetition here. Unable to align with the shoulders, then any power moving through the shoulders must certainly follow the elbows. Okay, so there's something called broken force, which is a fault, as opposed to connected. And that's a common fault. Even then they were saying this is the easiest error to commit. Number 7, the chi and the strength, 𝐒𝐿𝐿𝐿 𝐶𝐿, so that the chi and the strength arise together. So this is talking about the use of the air, the intra-abdominal compression and the breathing in coordination with the force generation. Air pushes strength out, strength pushes air out. Air means that directs the entire body function throughout any active motion, with the waist axis of central command. Again, the entire body, including the 4 limbs and one's entire skeletal framework, all receive its pushing motions. Strength is movement, movement is strength. The fuller the air, the greater the strength. Now, this is, I think, exactly right if you think about it. When I say the fuller the air, the greater the strength, that means the more abdominal compression, the more strength. Imagine lifting a heavy weight, the more you can. Those of you that are learning the 𝐏𝐻𝐿, the 12 bridges, will understand this concept a lot. When the practitioner has mastered air and strength produced together and can no longer tell the difference between whether he is using air or whether he is using strength, he's then achieved the surpassing ability of the highest order. Number 8, form and intention reciprocally follow. yin-yi-seng-toi. Form directs the body movement. Intention directs one's heartfelt intentions. Intent precedes movement, then form follows. Form is composed of formed physicality. Intent is composed of formless mental energy. Form and intent reciprocally follow when the body commands and the mind follows. It is because after having once defined the form, the body is then free to move reflexively, intent having been saturated to the point of overflowing. That probably is a topic for a whole waffle, that one. Number 9, we've got 2 more left. Hard and soft in practical usage. Hard is the polar opposite of soft, and soft is the inevitable fulfillment of hard. Hard can be harder, soft can be softer. These words, gong yao, sat mo, which is hard and soft, full and empty, represent principles. Thus, properly established, hard comes from soft and soft comes from hard. That is why practitioners must develop a balanced approach and not permit an inclination towards hard or an inclination towards soft. This will become a hindrance to one's potential. This is really interesting because in the Tai Chi, they're trying to produce the hardness out of the softness. And in the Shaolin, the softness comes out of the hardness. Last one, fast and slow. Funting, again, are clearly distinguished. Attack is ruled by fast, yet defense is ruled by slow. Training the body is better slow, and training the application is better when fast. In motion, the entire body's movement is trained with strength coming from the waist. In calmness, the entire spirit's quietude is trained with the intent held deep in one's heart. In every single movement from slow to fast, from soft to hard, with slow, the waist and stance gain precision in connection and structural stability. This is why we do Tai Chi slowly, right? Then winning is a waiting game. With fast, the body and the hand gains coordination and decisiveness. With active and adaptable bridge hands, your attack is indefensible. Okay, so again, quick, you're not going to learn it from that, but just to get an idea. So clearly they're saying the same stuff, right? They're speaking the same language. They've got the same theory. They're starting from a different set of movements. But it seems to me there's a huge amount of overlap. If you talk about the idea that, Tai Chi just never meets force with force and external Shaolin Kung Fu always meets force with force. If Tai Chi never uses force, and you push it and it yields, and then it can't do anything. It can't hit you. It can't hurt you. So you must have an issue of force. Okay. If Shaolin Kung Fu just only has solid force, it will break, it snap, it will be brittle. So therefore, clearly, the hard force must conceal softness, and the receiving must have the potential to become hard force. So that's my lecture for today. You guys with me? Fu Jiao, hard and soft are 2 sides of the same coin. It's exactly right, yes. So one of the things as well, in the West, when I'm teaching in the West, people know what Tai Chi is. That's a style of martial art that's kind of well known. So if you say Tai Chi, people know, it's soft, it's relaxed. Okay. If you say 𝐿 or 𝐿𝐴, people don't know. I'm talking about in the Western world, people don't know what is 𝐿, what is 𝐿𝐴. Wing Chun maybe they know more because of the Ip Man movies now, but Toi Lei Fat, Bak Mei, there's like 200 at least styles of Chinese Kung Fu, right? There's so many. And the Kung Fu is the generic term, but you have specific systems. So here we spoke about 𝐿. I only speak of 3 systems in terms of Chinese martial art: 𝐿, 𝐿𝐴, Tai Chi. Although I've studied others, not to any kind of great degree, but 𝐿, 𝐿𝐴, Tai Chi. So when I used to advertise my classes, if I put 𝐿, 𝐿𝐴, people wouldn't know what it is. So you say, I just use the generic Kung Fu. So you say, a Kung Fu class at 6:30, Tai Chi class at 7:30, something like that. It's wrong, because Tai Chi is one style of Kung Fu. Yeah, 𝐿 is another style of Kung Fu. But people don't know what that is. So from a business point of view, you have to say, Kung Fu, Tai Chi. No, Tai Chi, 𝐿𝐴, 𝐿𝐴 is always Kung Fu. But because now I can kind of talk about this stuff, so people misunderstand. They think, in Kung Fu you do this, and in Tai Chi you do that. Wrong. It's not. That's not right. It's not right thinking. Okay. Any of these principles making their way into Western sports science? Well, I think inevitably, yes. And I think the Western sports science is so much closer now when I'm looking at it to the Chinese martial art than how it was when I first started coaching Kung Fu, and we had to do some Western sports science in order to get our insurance and our coaching certificates. And it was basically telling us polar opposite of what we were teaching. And they'd say all these things, and we had to learn them to pass the exam and then throw them away. So yeah, I thought it wasn't very good at that time. This would have been like early 90s, right? I'm looking at the stuff they're doing now, and of course, because of like big business of combat sports and so on, and there's a lot more research, there's a lot more money in it. It's got much more sophisticated. It's way better, and again, guess what? It's getting more and more similar. The kind of language that they're using, it's getting more and more similar to the Chinese martial arts. So I would say yes. I was thinking of tennis, as it was really good today. I didn't see it. I'll give you an example, because I'm not really up with the modern sports stuff as much as I used to be. I used to spend a lot of time researching it, but now I'm retreating, and I'm just really practicing my Kung Fu. That's what I'm doing. So, but I'll give you an example. In 𝐒𝐻𝐿, they have this kind of movement. Right? Is a pushing. Is a sinking, abdominal compression, there's a contraction, isometric, and then a release of power. And I think was it Harvard or one of the big universities in America was doing research into isometrics, which is where you're pushing something that's not moving. So you're creating tension, and against, for example, just pushing a wall or pushing something that doesn't move. So you're creating an isometric contraction. And of course, it builds up strength. And then they were saying that for power, the optimum, and they tried all these different, ratios and percentages, and they did different groups, and they tested. And at the end of it, they came up with there's a term in Western science called plyometric. Plyometric is when you do a movement explosively, like elastic. Plyo, as in pliable. So you have this elastic. So for example, jumping off of boxes is plyometric. And so, of course, you want to, things like tennis, which is essentially an explosive movement, or anything involving jumping or explosive punching or something like that, they use plyometric type training. And so they were trying to work out what was the best ratio. And the conclusion of this great long paper was that a 3-second isometric contraction followed by a plyometric movement or an explosive release. So, for example, if you're doing bench press, you would be like and then an explosive release at the end was the optimal for firing up the nerves and developing this explosive power. So it seems to me that the 𝐻𝐿 kind of figured that out a long time ago. So yeah, I'm thinking they're catching up. Will they overtake it? Who knows? But yeah, men's singles. So tennis, 𝐿𝐴𝐷𝐻𝐿, 𝐒𝐡𝐚𝐧𝐬. A lot of the 𝐏𝐿𝐿 movement is very similar to tennis. Not Tai Chi, because you're looking at something, you're timing it, and you're generating a force in a long motion. Tai Chi is more like you're catching the ball and then kind of sticking to it. That's just an example. It's not my area of expertise, but I'm just sharing it for interest. So any questions on that, or observations or comments? Is it surprising that they're so similar, or probably those who've been training me for some time maybe is not surprised, but the relationship, of course, to Chinese medicine, because they both share the same underlying theory, which is the meridians and the pulses and so on. So I would pay to see Tai Chi football, yeah. So have you seen Shaolin soccer? The goalkeeper, she's a Tai Chi master, and they kick the ball and she catches the ball and she does the Chen style, the silk reeling, and throws it out. So that's a great movie. If anyone wants a funny movie, Shaolin soccer. In England, we would call it Shaolin football, but Tai Chi cricket might be better. Or catching the ball, maybe. Yeah. Those are great movies, yeah. If anyone's not seen Shaolin Soccer and any of the Stephen Chow movies, Kung Fu Hustle is one of my favorite. If I just want to laugh, Kung Fu Hustle is like Bruce Lee meets Looney Tunes. It's just so good. It's just so funny. It's absolutely like Looney Tunes humor, like the Roadrunner running, and fantastic. Anything else? We have 5 more minutes. So the stuff I was reading in tennis for the sports science that interested me wasn't so much about the force generation, although, you know, we have the kinetic chains, kinetic linking, and so on, the same as in Tai Chi. But the thing that was the most interesting for me, as far as tennis was going, these serves come at 100 miles an hour. So if you're waiting for the ball to come and you're visually reacting to it, it's going to be too late. It's going to be past you. It's a fraction of a second. And what they proved was, by analyzing and doing all these experiments on these really high-level tennis players, was what actually happened is before the ball met the racket, they were predicting, they were anticipating where the ball was going to go. So they were picking up cues about rotation of the wrist, position, weight shifting. So therefore, the brain was already predicting. So before that ball had hit, they knew it was going this way. And then, of course, they can fine-tune it on the way. So the thing that makes a real expert is that they can pick up information that other people wouldn't act on. So they know from experience. They've just played so many games. So they know, the part of the brain knows if the hand is slightly that way before it makes contact, it's going to go off at a different angle. And just the way everything's moving. So whereas maybe consciously they think they're reacting, the conscious mind thinks, right, he's coming that way, I'm going to do that. It's coming that way and do that. But when they did all the brain scans and everything, they found that they weren't reacting, they were predicting. And so that was something that really made a big difference in my own martial art, especially in the 𝐒𝐻𝐿 and the kickboxing, which is where you're at distance. In the Tai Chi, you're connected, you're physically connected, or in the jiu-jitsu, you're connected. So it's much more kind of tactile. Whereas in the 𝐒𝐻𝐿 or the kickboxing, you're visually responding to things. And so exactly the same thing applies when you see somebody like Anderson Silva or any of the great, Sugar Ray Leonard, that can just seems to be able to dodge punches and just he gets his head out of the way and then bop, and it's like superhuman. It's like being in the Matrix or something. And the mistake people think is that their reaction speed is so much higher than normal people, that they've got their reflexes are so fast, and it's actually not that. It's not that at all. It's the ability to predict when the person's punched, from their body, from their shoulder angle, from where the center of gravity is, that they know where the next punch is going to come. There's only so many ways you can move. So the brain is already saying, right, it maybe is down to 2 possibilities, not just like a chess master's not looking at like 100 things. They know it's going to be either this or this. Prediction. So the ability to predict, which is really sports science, but it's more to do with the brain science, the sort of neural science, rather than the physical training part of it. So the brain is the predictive. Returning serves now over 120. Wow, that's incredible. So what that means is, as they get better with the force generation, so they're more effective at generating these explosive and these kind of accelerating movements. Therefore, the time to respond is getting shorter. So therefore, it's even more important to be able to predict, and also to be able to predict with less data, because the more time you spend, the more data points you have to analyze, the slower the processor is, okay? So that if you can pick a few key points, like in martial arts, shoulders, hips, just from those, like if it's like a motion capture, you just have a few dots and you can pretty well plot the whole body. If you're trying to look at everything, it's too much information. It's like if a snake in the jungle in our evolutionary past, a snake comes out. If you're deciding what type of snake, what species, is it poisonous, is it a boa constrictor, is it this, is that, it's got you. There's something vaguely snake-like, and it elicits a response. So the less data you have to process, the faster your reaction is going to be, and that's a big part of martial arts. Do you think that skill is both innate and practiced? That's a great question. Now the great questions come. Now it's almost time. Now we have great questions. I'll tell you that in a second. Jones, so they're not reacting faster, they're reacting to an earlier moment, actually have longer to react because of that. Jones nailed it. It's exactly the right. It's exactly that. They're reacting to an earlier moment and have longer to react because of that. There was a famous gunfighter, Wyatt Earp. If you read Wyatt Earp, who was a gunfighter, cowboy, and he used to say, take your time in a hurry. Take your time in a hurry. That's exactly what it is. They're reacting to an earlier moment and have longer to react. So yeah. Kelly's one. Do you think the skill is both innate and practiced? That's a waffle in itself. There's innate reflexes and innate movement patterns. Innate reflexes and innate movement patterns that when we do Tai Chi, we're trying to drop the things that block our natural movement. Excess tension, bad habits, postural habits. So part of it is just getting back to that innate movement, which in itself is a practice, ironically. Okay, that's one part of it. Okay, the second part. Oh, you're thinking of predictive skill. Okay. It's practiced. It's not innate. Predictive skill is practiced because it's why your brain can only predict based on what it's seen before. There's a few things like, snakes, where a movement of a snake is seen, possibly is innate. There is a reflex there. But subtle things like predictive movement takes a lot of practice. Just think of it like, I say, a chess player who's played so many thousands and thousands of games that you look at a board and kind of see vectors and energies, and there's a pin there, there's a threat from this, whereas someone else looking at it just sees pieces, right? So it works by the brain saying, right, last time I was here, what happened? Which is why in martial arts, movement skills beautiful, Tai Chi forms wonderful. I love all this practice, right? But you can't be a fighter without fighting. If you've not been there before, your brain's got no experience to draw from. So the two things have to go together. In 𝐒𝐴𝐿 we call 𝐿𝐻𝐿, 𝐿𝐻𝐿. 𝐿𝐻𝐿 is the innate, 𝐿𝐻𝐿 is the trained. Literally means before heaven, after heaven. So you could say it's genetic and nature, nurture, whatever. 𝐿𝐻𝐿, 𝐿𝐻𝐿. If you have an art which is purely theoretical, 𝐿𝐻𝐿, like there's some kinds of kung fu that are totally conceptually brilliant. They're like, what's the word, intellectually perfect, but they don't map onto natural movement patterns. And then as soon as the person gets punched in the face, the whole thing just degenerates because you're fighting your body's natural movements. So you're trying to be over-intellectualize it. Okay. On the other extreme, you can have just a complete like caveman type of thing, which has got no finesse, no subtlety, no, so on. You have to have something that unites them. 𝐿𝐻𝐿, 𝐿𝐻𝐿, 𝐻𝐿. It means innate and trained have to harmonize together. That's how my Sifu used to explain it. So certain punches in 𝐒𝐿𝐻, cut choi, pao choi, lam choi, they're the same movements you'll see in a tennis serve, backhand, so on. These are natural movement patterns, and when someone gets hit, they'll naturally use that. But then what you have to do is refine it and train it. So the two things come together. And wholly based on experience, yeah, I would say so. So going back to kind of Buddhism, there's a story where Buddha was meditating, and there was a boat going by on the water, and there was a guy playing the sitar, and he was explaining to his student how you have to have the right tension in the string. He said if it's too tense, it will snap, and if it's too relaxed, it won't produce a note. And that was apparently Buddha's inspiration for his middle way, saying like, if you try too hard to force yourself to enlightenment, it will snap. And if you're too lax and you're just, sleeping in and lazy and indulging in the pleasures of like eating and everything else, then you will not create a note. You have to have the balance point. So yin and yang. So when he realized that, he produced this kind of effort which wasn't too much. And so we do the same thing in martial arts. It's like, it's effort, there's hardness, but it's not too much. There's always that softness there, and you're trying to steer that middle path. Yeah. So the same thing between the innate skill and the practice skill. But yeah, predictive skill, I think it's all down to, because it happens so fast, it's all down to the brain predicting based on previous experience. Yeah. So that's why I used to say to my MMA fighters, like, rather than trying to smash each other and then, you know, spending all your time recuperating from injuries, you play games. You play games that mimic certain aspects of the fight, and then you get a lot of experience, a lot of rounds in the different games. You know, maybe being trapped underneath somebody, or maybe trying to take somebody down off of the fence, and playing that as a game again, and the person's reacting, and then you're trying to predict, and they go that way, I will take this, he does that, I do that, and you know, you gradually develop your own experience and your own method. I think that's the best way of learning. Why do tiger cubs roll around on the ground? Why do animals play? It's that animals playing is building that experience. And Kung Fu people say they follow animals, that they're, you know, the Shaolin follows the animals and so on. But most martial arts people, when they're practicing, look anything but animals. They're rigid, stiff. You know, playfulness is, I think, really important. Good evening, Richard. Do you think the short fist system like Pak Mei and Wing Chun are workable in a fight? Oh, now we're contentious. They seem a long way from natural movement patterns. Well, you know, I look at it backwards, Richard. I'll look at fights, and then do we see those Wing Chun kind of movements in fights? Do we see Wing Chun people able to use those movements in fights? I've not really seen anything that convinces me. When combined with other skills, yes. Good amount of, you know, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, whatever, yes. Good question, yes. So Pak Mei, the concept of punching from here, right? Where do we see that? If you watch Muay Thai, you'll often see some clinching where the elbows and the punches are coming from here, because in a clinch you haven't got time to bring your hand back, so you can't use a hop guard type of a punch in a Muay Thai clinch. Hop guard doesn't use it in that case. Yeah, hop guard go to wrestling at that point, but Pak Mei might give you some energies from within a clinch system to punch from a short range, where your hands, for example, you're in contact with your opponent's arms. Maybe he's trying to go for your neck, you're sticking, and then it's going to give you some possible movement patterns. Is it going to look like the form? No, but you know, no martial art looks like a form anyway. So I would look at it in terms of that. The Pak Mei power from short position is, I think, fairly similar to some of the Muay Thai clinch work. That could be really explained a lot if, you know, if I had someone to show it on. It's difficult from just chatting to talk about it, but okay. The questions are coming in good now, but we're time. It's 20 past. So I'm going to call it tonight. Fu Jiao. Some concepts are definitely useful. I can see how Pak Mei is a bit like dirty boxing. This is my opinion, Richard, of where Chinese martial art is so good. Because Western martial arts separated boxing and wrestling. So therefore, when you're boxing, you're not allowed to hold on. And the goal is to knock the person out. When you're wrestling, you're not allowed to hit them, and the goal is to throw them down. Really interesting things happen on the interface of those two things. Can I hit you just enough to set up a throw? Can I unbalance you just enough to set up a punch? This is what I love about Chinese martial arts. Pak Mei, Hong Kong, Tai Chi all have really interesting strategies for that. And I think that's one of the strengths of Chinese martial art, that it's integrated. It's not assembled. Like MMA tends to be like, oh, I'll take some jiu-jitsu, I'll take some kickboxing, I'll take some wrestling, and they're often fundamentally different theories, and then trying to figure out how to fit them together into this kind of Frankenstein's monster. Whereas the Kung Fu is more organically grown, where you have tek da sut la dit, which is kicking, striking, wrestling, seizing, ground techniques, is more organic. But most Kung Fu people wouldn't do so well against MMA guys for the reason that, what I was talking about before, fight experience, play fighting, not enough. Not enough. So it needs to be taught in that way. So you can get the best of both worlds, which is kind of what I was trying to do with the Rising Crane. Was what I was doing. Okay, so I'm going to call it there. Again, almost an hour now, because it all come at the end, didn't it? The first half an hour was just me talking. Send me some questions for next time. And tomorrow night is, for those of you in the academy, tomorrow night is Zoom night. So you want me to check your forms, 𝐂𝐡𝐚𝐧𝐧𝐞, 𝐻𝐿, I'm happy to do some corrections for you. Thanks for an excellent waffle. Well, thank you. I had no idea. I just said I'll just read a bit and see what comes. But sometimes the best. Tomorrow in Zoom. Thank you very much. All right. 𝐒𝐴𝐽𝐽𝐸𝐴. Thank you.